Alrighty, so I just got back from work. To be fair, it's actually day 2 of the summit, but I got back home a bit early today, so I was just like, okay, actually it's a great time and I guess opportunity. Okay, I think the lighting is better this way. Okay, I figured that it's a great time and opportunity for us to just chat very much off the cuff around my personal reflections, what I've learned, sorry guys, I'm just trying to get an angle that works. Is it? I don't know. Okay, we'll live. But just to get some like unfiltered thoughts around Unspoken, I'll be very honest. I think it's very uncomfortable for me to speak about this topic that goes into the inner lives of men. I think in as much as I can intellectualize it, I can articulate it, and I can speak to why it matters to me, it's still a very uncomfortable journey to walk. Very much aware I'm a woman, and very much aware around how even as women we actually speak a lot around men not being in our business. So it feels like, but why am I in their business? But guys, it's just so important. You know, I look at the past couple of years that I've spent working in finance, and I can tell you, look, men are not a monolith, but what I will say is that the common thread around the best male colleagues I've had, what is common actually in all of them, is that they've either gone for therapy, or there are people who read and therefore reflect also quite a bit, so they have some journaling practice. They are men who have very healthy platonic relationships with other women, where, you know, the interest is not even romantic, but it's just more so, I think they have, yeah, the relationship is platonic, and as a result there's a lot of learning and growing that is informed by the female perspective, like in terms of how they navigate life. They have so much nuance. So it's therapy, it's those who have platonic relationships with women where they get to learn about the female experience. It's those who read and reflect. It's those who listen to podcasts that are healthy, that very much I would say, you know, not all podcasts are made equally, but I think you guys get me. But basically they listen to really high quality discussions that other men lead, or they are men who are surrounded by other men who are mature, who are sober, who are just, I guess, on a path that one could consider dignified. And I think part of why I have a strong burden for this conversation is because I don't believe that being a man that is nuanced is something that comes naturally, in the same way that even for women, I don't think being a woman that is, you know, headstrong, that has a strong character, so on and so forth, is something that comes naturally. It's something that you have to nurture, it's something that you have to build, it's something that you have to be intentional about. And I've found that those who are able to build that kind of character within themselves, it's because they're doing the work. It's because, you know, they're reading, they're writing, they're reflecting, they're surrounding themselves by people, they're surrounding themselves with people who are in some measure doing better than them. So it's kind of like in conversation, in observation, you know, you're just in a position of learning. It's people who listen to the right people, if I can say right, and I say it right because I don't think everyone deserves to be necessarily like a role model or someone that you look up to, and you can make that decision for yourself about like who you'll listen to, who you won't listen to. A quick filter that I use is like, you shall know them by their fruit. So you don't have to even know a person personally to know if this is someone you should listen to. The nice part about being a little bit older is that everyone has a track record, so you can basically see that, is this someone who consistently is making good decisions or bad decisions, or is this someone who their life is of such a texture that it's inspiring for me. So we all have, you know, different things that move us. So I'm not going to prescribe anything. But I think the one thing that I am definitely saying is, in the spirit of Unspoken and where we're focusing on the male experience, but I think also women can apply the principle in their life. But in the context of Unspoken, colleagues, our male counterparts, please invest in doing the inner work. It will serve you in your personal context, I think, so richly. But I think I speak more so in your professional context to say that you'll become a colleague that is a lot more nuanced, that is a lot more enjoyable, that is a lot more respected. A colleague that I think will have the kinds of relationships that will propel you forward. And in fact, one of my colleagues and I were once speaking about how you can have a title, but whether or not people respect that title, or whether people view you as someone who's worthy of to be followed, like, that's a whole separate thing. So title versus influence, yeah, in fact, that's the best way I can summarize it. Title versus influence. You will become a person who's influential, and you don't have to wait up until you are a senior, a principal, a vice president, a partner, if you're working at a law firm, in order to garner that kind of influence amongst juniors, amongst your peers, and even among seniors who genuinely are identifying you as someone who could one day take the reins of leadership. I think basically I'm just so, like, I even remember when I was thinking about the guests and I was just also having certain conversations with certain people, I think what was important for me was just like the caliber of people to invite. It was important for me to invite people who I think have the makeup for what at least I deem to be respectable qualities. So guys, men specifically, in the context of Unspoken, put in the work. It is definitely worth it. I will say that my main takeaway, maybe I can even reflect on my first episode, which was on male, the male pressure that they have to, to provide and to show up as these leaders with ulungelo. And I think one thing I appreciated from that discussion was around, for a lot of men, the pressure to provide is a real thing, and it definitely informs how they show up in the workplace, and how, I guess, maybe the optionality or the lack of optionality that they sometimes may experience, in that maybe as a woman, and obviously I'm not saying this is the experience for all women, but maybe as a woman you don't necessarily have that burden to say that I want to provide, if your pressure to provide is more so maybe if you are born into unfortunate socioeconomic conditions. But I don't think you're like, oh, I need to work hard so that one day I can take care of my husband and my children. Like, obviously I'm not saying that's all women, so I'm definitely not saying this is everyone's lived experience, but I do definitely know that for a lot of men, part of their pressure to provide is informed by the fact that, irrespective of the socioeconomic status of my parents or my family, I do feel the burden to one day provide for my wife and my future children, and that obviously speaks to the things that they will be willing to live through and accept in the workplace that maybe a woman just maybe won't be able or won't be willing to live with or take up. So that was interesting, and understanding that pressure sometimes it's overwhelming, and I think as a person who sometimes feels under pressure, it's crazy to me to know that there are people, i.e. men, who feel that kind of pressure, not because work is hectic that day, as in that is the pressure they feel on a daily basis, to be like, I have to make myself proud, and part of making myself proud is being able to provide, and part of being able to provide is showing up in this job, so yeah, it's like I extend a lot of compassion, and I think for me it was good having the conversation. I've always known that men have that pressure, but I think to feel the heart behind it, because I think Lungelo was very transparent around his experience with that. It just leaves a different a different feeling, so to say. Okay, so that's my reflection on Lungelo's episode. Then when we're looking at Masego's episode around men, money, and meaning, I was so impressed when he anchored his perspective in, before looking at your why, or you need to first figure out your what, and that understanding your makeup, understanding what you actually are, will inform your purpose. We are engineered very differently to like animals, to whatever else, and that should speak to how we then define meaning and success for ourselves. And I really enjoyed how for him, and I think that's why he was so perfect for the episode, he was very explicit in defining success beyond money, whilst not diminishing the fact that money is a huge source of meaning for a lot of men, and we cannot run away from that. And I think for me, it speaks to shame. And like, I think being not necessarily softer, but I think being more aware of how finances are such a sensitive topic for men. Like, not saying that they're not a sensitive topic for women, but for men, money directly speaks to their sense of self-worth. And that's crazy, because life, and not even that it's crazy in that, like, I think you get what I mean, but it's crazy in the sense that it's almost like I feel so sad that how they perceive themselves is anchored in something that, I don't want to say money is fickle, but like, if you've lived long enough, you'll know that sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down. You get me? And I would hate to peg my own emotions or my self-worth in something like money, where just genuinely you may just be in a season where it's hard to get a job, or it's hard to get a job that is actually paying you your worth, or it's hard to get a job that in and of itself is lucrative enough, so just to have him articulate that, I think for me has definitely made me hyper aware of just like how big this whole thing of money is for men, and how it ties to their self-worth. And yeah, I think maybe I may not have an immediate application of that insight right now, being a junior in a workplace, but I think it's something that I think will inform, and I would love for one of you, if not everyone, to hold me accountable, but I think it'll definitely inform even as in the future when we're leaders, issues around compensation. Like, I'm not saying, like, obviously there's a whole issue around gender wage gap and whatever. I'm not disregarding that. I'm not saying that, oh, therefore we will pay men crazy amounts of money so that they feel better about themselves. But it's just a nuance. It's just something that I'm like, that's interesting, and I think maybe, as I've already mentioned, I don't have a direct application or like use case for that insight, but I think it will become more relevant when I am in a position to make, I guess, decisions that influence others. But yeah, I think, long story short, really appreciated that insight. And I'm definitely taking it with me. And I think moving on then to the last episode that we had with Ukanyo, redefining masculinity. What does masculinity mean? I truly appreciated the vulnerability around, hey, I haven't always been nuanced. I haven't always been hypersensitive to the things that I should have been sensitive to, things that I should have been aware of. And for me, it's not in so much, it's in him narrating his journey was deeply valuable to me, because I think a lot of people aren't honest about the fact that they haven't always been the men that they are right now. It's kind of, and I think for me, it then further alienates other men who may be trying to do better. it's so much easier to relate to someone who's like, hey, I actually wasn't always like this. It took education. It took someone conscientizing me of the ways in which I've been toxic. It took me reflecting and doing the work in order for me to get it. It's sort of like you strip away the human element of I was once like of I once made mistakes, and it's so then like it becomes very difficult to then relate to a person who's like that, and you almost feel that you could never, you know, be this person who I don't know, who's a lot more in touch with themselves, especially like for men, right? Speaking about your inner life is not something that comes easily, and I totally respect that. But I can imagine that it's so inspiring to see someone who says, hey, I also wasn't always like that, you know, but through conversations, through the influence of other people, through my own personal reflection and growth, I've become better. And I think I loved that thread in his episode, where if you actually deep it, like that's someone who's walked the journey of getting to a place of openness and vulnerability. So I think that also is a lesson for men and just anyone who's trying to be on this journey, to say you can do it. And it's not always something that's going to require you to go into therapy, especially if that's not something you have access to. But it is something that is available if you're willing to do the work. Like literally ask the people that are around you to be like, hey, how are you experiencing me? How can I do better? You know, so I loved that practical insight. I loved how he walked us through his own walk, because then I think it gives other men a blueprint for how they can start on their journey. Okay, so yeah, guys, I think for me that's just my off the cuff reflections. I am so touched. As I said, for me it remains a personal challenge to then say, how do we take this forward? You know, how do we become people who, and I know I've said this word ad nauseum, but I think it's because that's what I'm trying to communicate. But how do we become people who don't always exist in the extremities of like black and white, like people who can navigate the gray, because so much of life actually happens in the gray. People who can hold multiple truths, people who can just relate to each other a lot better. Because I think if men and women were more empathetic towards each other, I think I'm not saying that is the silver bullet, that is what is going to solve every problem in society, every problem in the workplace. But I think, in fact, from a workplace perspective, I think if we spent a bit more time understanding each other as people, not in our roles and our ranks, as people, I think we would make for more powerful teams. I think we'd make for more impactful work. And more than anything, I think we'd make for more, workplace environments that are a lot more inclusive, which ultimately would enable, I think, better performance, you know. So definitely it's like an indirect like performance lever, but I'm not trying to tie everything back to productivity. But yeah, I think we do well to spend time understanding each other. And yeah, I'm not even saying that Unspoken is the silver bullet, but I think it is the trigger for us to start having the conversations that matter about what is often left unspoken. And I really hope that this season or this series has been insightful and rich for you. It most certainly has been for me, and I look forward to seeing how we all grow together as we take this series forward. So yeah, that's enough from me. It's like, I don't know, it's most probably like 2:08 now, so I'm gonna go off. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you so much for sharing your views and your experiences. The series is more than just me and my guests. It's you all of you sharing your experiences, sharing your insights, challenging the views. And yeah, I'd like to thank each and every one of you. And yeah, stick around. Let's see what else we start to speak about on the topic of the inner lives of men, and of course for the girlies, even in the future, the inner lives of women as well, because I think there's also a conversation to be had there. Anyways, that is all from me. Do keep well. Love and light. Mamello. Bye.